We are talking space this morning. Brandy is the DJ. We want some walk-on music from Nick Jonas.
I'm a spaceman. Yeah, I'm a spaceman.
His Excellency Ibrahim Al Qassim is not quite a spaceman, but he is the Deputy Director General of the UAE Space Agency. And I'm delighted to say he's with us in the studio this morning. Your Excellency, good morning. Ahlan wa sahlan.
Good morning, Richard.
Let's talk about this new 3 billion dirham fund that was announced earlier on this week to boost investment in satellites and other space programs here in the UAE. This is what President Mohammed had to say about it. He says the establishment of a dedicated fund to support the UAE's burgeoning space program and the launch of a new initiative to develop radar satellites are expected to expand our growing capabilities in this vital sector. What is this new 3 billion dirham fund, and what are you going to do with the cash?
So, Richard, to understand where this fund fits in the overall sort of ecosystem of the UAE space program, let's talk a little bit about why the UAE started to invest in space. Actually, this year we celebrate 25 years since the beginning of the UAE space program, with the beginning of Thuraya constellation, making the UAE an operator as opposed to a user of space services. In 2006, the Emirates Institution for Advanced Science and Technology was established, which we know today as the MBRSC, and that sort of transitioned the UAE into a system developer of space technology. Space was always a means for the UAE government to diversify its economy, to upskill its talent force, and to build industrial capabilities across the economy. So it's not the primary objective. It's a means to an end to a diversified, industrialized, knowledge-based, innovative economy. The UAE Space Agency was established in 2014 with a mandate to set the national priorities when it comes to the areas the UAE would like to build its capabilities in space. Space is vast, not only physically, but in terms of technology. A small nation can get very disoriented focusing on what to build. And the UAE Space Agency sort of coordinates with stakeholders across the sector and sets a roadmap to what we would like to specialize in. Over the last 8 years, we've invested about 2 billion dirhams building national capabilities, empowering youth, making space technologies and opportunities in space missions accessible to them. The most notable of which is the Emirates Mars mission that successfully made orbit into around Mars in February 2021. The Space Fund, the National Space Fund, comes as a continuation of that, and to expand on what potentially the mission for the exploration of the asteroid belt, which was announced last year, will aim to do. 50% of this new mission will focus on allowing the private sector opportunities to design and develop the hardware for the mission. We'd like to allow a cluster of startups and SMEs to grow around these missions, and that was always the vision for our space program. That would be the mandate. So de-risking and absorbing the cost of elevating technology readiness levels from TRL 3 up until 7, where you have a system demonstration, and then after that, the larger sort of private companies can come in and commercialize it.
So it strikes me that there's a couple of different things going on here. One is the very commercial part of space, and satellites are part of that. We've got Yahsat as a listed company in Abu Dhabi. But then you've got things like the Mars mission, and there's talk of Venus missions as well, which aren't obviously monetizable. There may be more research for research's sake. And you've been working on this a long time. You spent nearly a decade up at the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center in Khawanij here in Dubai. How accurate is that characterization?
That's a really good question, by the way, because you have missions like the Emirates Mars mission and what we currently call MAX, the mission for the exploration of the asteroid belt, that don't have a commercial spin to it, except in the upstream. So if you open up this opportunity for companies to bid and to build parts of these missions, then they make money in the upstreams. But there's no there's no end user to it except for the science community around the world. So except for the fact that we would be answering scientific questions that we don't know about Mars or the asteroid belt. But that drives innovation in your industries, and it creates these companies that eventually can dedicate that capacity or that capability to terrestrial applications. Something that was designed to go to Mars can certainly do wonders around Earth or here on the surface of Earth.
We had this agreement over the past 48 hours or so signed in Paris as part of President Mohammed's state visit there between space authorities in France and space authorities here in the UAE. We don't have a huge amount of detail of it, but one of the things that was mentioned was human spaceflight activities. To what extent is that on your radar at the space agency, humans in space rather than satellites or probes?
So human space flights is a major part of any space exploration program, and the UAE's astronaut program has been truly a very powerful, inspirational element of our space program. With the recent announcement of an extended mission into the ISS with our next astronaut, it's critical that we get the right experiments sort of designed and chosen for these missions, because they'll be there for an extended period of time, the human. I mean, there's nothing more exciting for young people than to see an astronaut floating in the ISS, talking to them about how it feels like to be in zero gravity.
How far, though, could those human spaceflight activities, that partnership with France, actually go? Could we go as far as space tourism here in the UAE?
I think space tourism is something that was more science fiction maybe a decade ago. But one thing happened in recent years that made that very attainable, or we see a path towards space tourism in the very near future, and it's simple economics. The significant drop in the cost of launching. So about 10 years ago, it cost you about $100,000 per kilogram to launch. Today, as it sits, it's roughly around $3,000 per kilogram, which is a significant drop. And it was a simple. I mean, it's not a simple technology, but it was a simple idea of reusing rockets as opposed to just disposing of them after every launch that significantly dropped the cost. So if you have reusable, very reliable rockets that can take people up to the ISS or to potentially a commercial recreational space station, space tourism becomes a reality. And even a colony on the surface of the moon becomes more realistic.
Dubai Eye 103.8.
Join the conversation.